Hi, welcome to another episode of What is a Coral, but we're not doing a coral today. We're going to be doing a clam. I figured it would be nice and suitable to kind of let everyone know that when it comes to photosynthetic critters, it's not just limited to corals and cnidarians. Clams, mollusks, maybe a bunch of other stuff, worms, we're not exactly sure. Lots of stuff can be photosynthetic in the way that it can have tissue, gastrodermal tissue, where it can house zooxanthellae, algae, fungi, bacteria, and all this other stuff. So today we're going to be breaking the mold a little bit with the Tridactynae. This is a tridactynid clam. It's a member of the cockle family, but unlike a blood arc or something that you would see at a Chinese seafood buffet, this is a beautiful clam that is not widely consumed, even though many species are commonly consumed in their home range. But for the most part, especially around here, it is far more embraced as an ornamental, beautiful aquarium species. So there are a variety of different species. The true giant clam is Tridacna gigas. So actually, when I was studying in Australia, I had the good fortune of being able to meet Dr. Richard Braley, who actually closed the life cycle of Tridacna gigas. So this was a man who had spent his entire career at the Peace Corps, working with people from the Solomon Islands and the like, actually eating a variety of these Tridacna species, fell in love with them, and then when he retired to Australia, he was able to get his PhD, closing the life cycle, and from then on, Tridacna clam aquaculture has become widespread throughout the world, not only providing sustainable individuals of Maxima, Squamosa, DeRosa, and other species to the aquarium industry, providing peoples in countries like the Philippines, in Indonesia, and the Solomon Islands a means of being able to repopulate their clam beds, provide a sustainable food industry, and at the same time, provide a tourism industry. While I was with Dr. Richard Braley, we would essentially, just after he spawned clams, we would transport them out into snorkel beds and set them out. So unlike most coral, they do require a fair amount of filter feeding, especially when they're young. They require really elevated alkalinity and calcium levels because they're constantly growing. And then once they reach a relatively adult size, they're a little less dependent on actual feeding, on phytoplankton and the like, and they can become primarily photosynthetic. And you see the manifestation of all their different colors and the different phytoplankton and the like that they acquire because it stores up in their beautiful mantle tissue, which no two individuals are exactly the same. I also had the good fortune of being able to see a tremendous amount of Tridacna aquaculture being done in the Philippines at Bolinao University. My buddy Eli over here, he'll tell you all about that.
So during our study abroad at the University of Rhode Island, we got to check out these clams being farmed in Bolinao in the Philippines. Super cool operation there. These clams, both gigas clams, Maxima clams, and some of the other species are being aquacultured by the universities there to kind of aid in restoration efforts of these clams in their wild habitat. For quite a while, these clams were fished actually for their meat in areas like New Guinea and the Philippines, as well as for their ornamental value, and even for just value of their shells, as they were used as honestly decorative pieces. So unfortunately, these clams are kind of less common in the wild than they used to be. However, a lot of these restoration efforts have been very successful. They can actually be farmed on relatively small scales with relatively little equipment. One of my favorite things about these clams is it's very easy to kind of forget that maybe corals are animals. A lot of people like to think of them as plants, but when you think of a clam, you can absolutely think of this animal as an actual animal. These are one of the only clams that I personally know of that are actually photosynthetic, but this is something that they are not born with the ability to do. It actually occurs some point after the settlement of these baby clams where they will uptake zooxanthellae and other symbionts that allow them to gain these super cool pigments and also kind of partake in photosynthetic ability, just like corals do, just like plants do. So especially for the larger tridactynid clams, these clams actually rely almost entirely on photosynthesis to gain their nutrients, but at smaller sizes do benefit from their filter feeding abilities, just like your average clam, where they will uptake bacteria and plankton in order to fulfill their dietary needs.
We'll indulge you in a little bit more because Eli and I are aquaculture students and we did raise a good amount of shellfish in our day. Most shellfish can be induced to spawn with a spike in temperature or drop in temperature or spike in salt and like. Not so much these guys because they live on the equator and life and the water quality is relatively consistent. Besides the lunar cycle, which gets them ready to go with their sperm and egg, the way to get these guys going is you go out in the reef or you bring them up into the hatchery and you inject them with a little bit of serotonin, one of those universal good substances, and you put the good substance right in that mantle. You just inject it right on in there. And then, with the coordination of the moon, you send divers down, or if you have a bunch in the hatchery tanks, you can do it locally, and you essentially put, because you gotta keep in mind with Gygus, you're dealing with a clam that's like big. So you can actually, they have to put garbage cans over the mantle and just collect the egg and sperm, which they can then dose, and then as Eli described, they go through the larval process and then getting them to fuse with their symbiont. That's a whole other can of worms. This is a fantastic aquaculture species. It represents a dividing of worlds, a fusing of worlds, and despite the fact that it is incredibly complex and incredibly sought after, it's on the road to being more sustainable than not. And on that note, I would like to say that it's been an infinite pleasure to kind of funnel my way through the world of corals with you up until this point. My time here at OSA, I'm afraid, is coming to a close, but I am more than enthusiastic to pass the torch coral. And to my dearest friend, and much more qualified than I, Mr. Eli.
Thank you, Taras.
We were gonna do like a Blue's Clues thing. So I'm going off to college.
To the good old colleges of Florida.
They're shipping me off to a farm.
I'd love to extend a heartfelt welcome, or heartfelt thank you to Ross Pleskin, my dear buddy. Thank you for all of your passion and wonderful videos on the topic of
I'll see you next time. Bye.